Order at 2 p.m. Let's, you can cue in if you have any withdrawals or deferrals, please. All right, open a machine for attendance for roll call. The record reflected all council members are present except for Dr. Gu. He's out of the building right now. He'll be right back. He's in attendance. We have all 9. We have no executive session and no proclamations. Mr. Russo?
Yes, at this time, I'd like to ask the president to set another meeting up, and we'll defer item under 10 now, 10E, and withdraw 10E2,
So withdrawing 10E2?
and deferring
Okay.
10E.
Okay.
1.
All right, anyone else? Cue in, please, if you have a withdrawal or deferral. Ms. Newberry?
Yeah, withdrawing G1, and I'm deferring G2.
What is G?
In the back. G1, I'm withdrawing, deferring G2.
Okay, is that all?
Deferring,
Go ahead, cue in, Ms. LaFrance.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. LaFrance.
Defer item D on the back page.
Okay. Was that all?
Yes.
Yeah, I got it. I have a couple. Non-A2 is deferred. All right, that's all. All right, the following items are withdrawn or deferred. 9A2 is deferred. 10D is deferred. 10E1 is deferred. 10E2 is withdrawn. 10G1 is withdrawn. 10G2 is deferred. And that's all. All right, before we get started, I just want to recognize Ms. Mary Elise Schlesinger from Senator John Kennedy's office today. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. All right, item 4, please. Status update by the parish president.
Mr. Black? Oh, thank you, guys. Hello, Mary Elise. I apologize not recognizing you. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon, Council. The 21st Annual Faux Pas Lodge Invitation Fishing Rodeo will be held in Venice starting today through Sunday. The following week, the 69th Annual Empire South Pass Tarpon Rodeo will be held at the Empire Boat Harbor August 1st through the 3rd. John Helmuth and I traveled to Washington, D.C. on July 16th and 17th for meetings in support of our federal disaster declaration for our flooded fisheries. On Tuesday, July 23rd, U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, Republican from Mississippi, introduced legislation to create a disaster assistance program for commercial fishing and aquatic agricultural operations. U.S. Senator John Kennedy is original co-sponsor on the legislation. And that was said, I'm going to take a personal note. And just a week ago or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, we experienced our first storm. And I just want to personally thank each and every one of you guys who were there and for your help, your support. One of these situations I had when I was running is I said I wanted to bring unity. And I wanted everyone to know, and I wanted everyone to be part of the operations, the decisions. So I'm glad each and every one of you were there. At the press conference, I think that was a very great sign of unity, so I appreciate each of you. And another note is we have the best workers in the world, ladies and gentlemen. Our parish workers went above and beyond, and thank goodness it was just a small storm, but I know that I can count on them and I can count on you. So I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. President. Job well done yourself.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the table? From the audience? Do we have any items on 6B1, 4B1 and 2? Any from the table? All right, with none on 6B1 and 2, those are deferred. Bids and advertisements, do we have any? Queue in if you have a beer or liquor license, please. All right, none. Building permits, we have an issue taking 7A1 and 2 in Globo. Any objections from the table? I have no objection, we'll take 1 and 2 in Globo. Ms. Marcotte?
7A1 CHS Inc., application number 2019-244, dated June 28, 2019. Demolish 2 deteriorated cells and 1 tripod dolphin and replace them with 3 monopole dolphins, Myrtle Grove area. Councilmember LaFrance. Number 2, Chevron Pipeline Company, application number 2019-455, dated July 3, 2019. Install valve and maintenance on the existing 20H Brenton Sound Pipeline, Main Pass Area Block 22. Councilmember Bartholomew.
So offered.
Second by Mr. Bartholomew, offered by Mr. LaFrance. Any questions or comments from the audience, from the table? With none, machine is open. And the permit's passed 7-2 with 2 abstentions for myself and District 9. Item 8, please, introduction of ordinance and resolutions. Please queue in if you have one. Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes, I have one, but we need some clarification on, but I'm just going to introduce it so we can make the amendment. A resolution authorizing the removal of Point Lehigh Ferry Landing Bridge replacement from DOTT Office Bridge System and otherwise to provide respect thereto. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Karnovich.
Yeah, ordinance to amend the 2019 general fund operating expenditure budget, buildings, Bureau's auditorium department, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
That's all. All right, I have a couple. Resolution ordering and calling a special election to be held in the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, to amend the existing charter for local self-government of Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, making application to the State Bond Commission connection there within, and providing for other matters of connection within. For your curiosity, all it is because we did our ordinance last time, and legal says we need to do an ordinance and a resolution on that one. A resolution confirming the recommendation of the parish president, Kirk M. Lapine, and the appointment of Leslie R. Press as member of the Metropolitan Human Services District Board of Directors, representing Plaquemines Parish, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. An ordinance to amend the 2019 Manpower Structure Road Maintenance Fund, Road Maintenance Public Right-of-Way Department, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. An ordinance to amend the 2019 General Fund Operating Expenditure Budget, Engineering and Public Works Department, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. An ordinance to amend the 2019 Manpower Structure General Fund Finance and Accounting Department, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Give me 1 second, let me just read these two real quick. Tommy, I'm gonna wait on these two. I haven't read them yet. This is mandatory, the bonds?
I don't know about the.
Yeah, I did that one. Did I,
Are you aware on the bond?
no, did I do I did the one for the transfer from unreserved undesignated? The rollover?
Line of credit.
No. Talking about the other resolution.
Did I do that one, Barbara? That is in your stack? No, the line of credit. I just want to make sure, these two?
One of them is a refinance and one of them is the line of credit. The one that says 7 million, that's the line of credit one.
All right, I'm gonna hold off on the other one. Is that fine? Or you need them done?
I need that one done. If we're going to do it.
I'll do both of them, but I have an issue with one of them. A resolution giving preliminary approval to the issuance of not exceeding $7 million of revenue anticipation notes of the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, providing certain terms of said notes, making application to the State Bond Commission for approval of said notes, and providing for other matters in connection herewithin. A resolution giving preliminary approval to the issuance of exceeding $60 million of revenue refunding bonds with the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, making application to the State Bond Commission for approval of said bonds and providing for other matters in connection with them. All right, that's all. Does anybody have any other introductions? All right, we'll come back to that item. All right, at the request of Councilmember LaFrance, let's move to item 9A1.
9A1, an ordinance by the Plaquemines Parish Council as and on behalf of the West Bank Levy District to acquire new perpetual flood levee, flood wall easements, new perpetual flood protection levee, flood wall and drainage ditch easements, new perpetual drainage ditch easements, and new temporary work area easements in certain portions of land in Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana by donation, purchase, appropriation, and/or expropriation to construct the New Orleans to Venice NOV-NF-W-05A.1, Lower Seat to Myrtle Grove, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, for levee, flood wall, drainage, flood access, and hurricane protection purposes, and otherwise to file with respect thereto.
Mr. LaFrance?
So offered.
Offered. You have a second? Mr. Blink seconds. Any questions or comments from the table? From the audience? All right, with none, Mr. LaFrance?
We have Mr. Kevin Wagner. Mr. Kevin Wagner is with the Corps of Engineers.
All right, Mr. Wagner, just state your name and your position, please.
Kevin Wagner, I'm the Senior Project Manager for the New Orleans to Venice, Louisiana project.
All right, thank you.
Anyone have any question for Mr. Wagner?
Mr. Roussel?
I just have a comment now. It's my understanding that this is the last authorization that we need, and this would be a question probably to LV, but this is the last section that we have to approve on the NOV project.
Yes, sir, that is correct. We have already, the council has already voted on the other 3 remaining non-fed levy reaches. The parish is in the process of acquiring those lands, the land interest that's necessary for those projects. So this is the very last contract that we're looking at acquiring lands.
And have we made some progress on this, where this levy will tie in with the diversion levy if it happens?
Yes, sir. We have already coordinated with the CPRA as well to find out where the diversion is going to come into play. We are working very closely with them to see how that's going to work out with our levy alignment. We had talked about the area where the diversion comes into play and crosses this proposed levy alignment, possibly doing that as an option so that we can exercise that option at a later date so that we don't expend money building that section of levy to have it rebuilt again.
And do we have, I know Mr. LaFrance has been working hard trying to get some acquisitions donated. Is that still in the works?
I'll have to defer to LV on that one.
Let's ask all the questions from Mr. Wagner before we bring, I don't want.
All right, Mr. Wagner. So this will be the last section, and do we know what level of protection that we're building?
Yes, sir. This is going to be built to the 25-year level of risk reduction.
25?
Most of the non-fed levee reaches that are remaining to be constructed will be constructed at 25-year.
In the Jesuit Bend area, that's already been built to what year?
The 50-year level of risk reduction. That was one of our early contracts that was awarded. We didn't want to go ahead and change the level of risk reduction since it was already awarded under construction, so we left that one be built to the 50-year. But because of the funding constraints that we do have, we had to revise the remaining portions of the levee system on the non-fed portion, just so we could provide protection from La Receipt all the way down to St. Jude.
So from La Receipt to St. Jude will be 25 year?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Only, and let me just clarify, portions of that, though, will be constructed to 50 years. So where we have hardened structures, where we have fronting protection jobs that are being constructed, those are being done to the 50-year because we don't want to have to come back and modify those particular projects since they are structural.
Like pump stations?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Gouy?
When you're talking about the
Hold on one second. Go ahead.
talking about the diversion. So there are actually 2 designs then. There's a design if there's no diversion, and there's a design if there's a diversion.
From our perspective, we've already had the levee alignment design. The state of Louisiana CPRA has the design ongoing for the diversion project. And like I said, we're working closely with them to see how that intersects with our project. but we're not changing our design. There are two separate designs, so like you said, sir.
Good. And funding is in place.
Yes, sir. There is adequate funding right now to at least do phase one of these levee constructions. Normally, we do them in two phases. We simply just do not have enough funding to do phase two. What phase two basically consists of is after we build the levee, we allow it to sit for a certain period of time. Normally, that's about a year. And then where we find areas that had settled, we would come back and raise those levees up. But we simply just do not have enough money to do that portion of the work.
So there may be some areas in that levee that are below the 25-year.
Well, we'll have to see when we finish construction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a reality, though. I mean, we still could be facing that
Yes, sir.
in the future. Okay. And then any projections on a schedule?
Yes, sir. So the four remaining contracts will be awarded between the last quarter of this calendar year and the first two quarters of next calendar year. So we're looking in, say, April of 2020 to have our last contract awarded, which of course is this levee reach. And that assumes we can maintain the current schedule for acquisition of lands as well as performing the relocations that are necessary for the project.
Now, you're talking about acquisition of land. If there's anybody that's giving us resistance, we do have the right to take it at fair market value, correct?
Again, I'll have to defer that question because
Coming up later.
yes, the non-federal sponsor, which is
Yeah.
Plaquemines Parish Government, is responsible for acquiring all lands, easements, rights of way, and disposal areas.
Remember that, LV, because I'm going to ask you, but I might forget. You know, people that are not budging, we can make them budge. So again, now I say schedule, maybe I should have phrased it as timing. What are we looking at, best guess, when we'll have this project completed?
So right now, it's September of 2023, if all goes well. That assumes we don't have high river like we've been having. As soon as we don't have a lot of adverse weather that could potentially delay the construction. But from the latter part of this calendar year, we should be able to start construction, and normally these projects take about 3 to 5 years to construct.
Well, that's.
These are long levee reaches. We have about 18 miles to cover with the non-fed levee.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that when we get asked by our residents, are you ever going to build a levee, that we can tell them the projected timeline is the year 2023.
Yes, sir.
And I hope you're right.
Me too.
Mr. Blank?
Sure, 90% of my questions were already answered, but I do have one. What does the Corps do to coordinate with their contractors before a tropical event is going to happen? We had a breach down at the West Point Lahash siphon that seemed almost preventable and that we've never had before in the past.
We normally have language in our contracts to have a hurricane plan in place. It's unfortunate that these particular ones did not have that language in place for this latest event. We did take measures to put some temporary flood protection in place. We tried to match the elevation of the existing levees. Those measures that we put in place, some of those were over top. Some of the measures actually moved when we placed the sandbags in those openings where we had not completed the concrete monoliths. Some of those things had moved. They got overtopped. But we are making efforts right now to make sure that if we do have another event, we put better measures in place for the next event. And hopefully we get through this hurricane season without another event impacting this area.
Ms. Newberry?
Yes, I have a question. To the 25-year levy, what is the height of that levy?
It'll vary, ma'am. It depends on where we are in the levee construction for a particular, like on this 5A1 reach. When we get closer to the river, our design grade that we have to achieve is around elevation 8. We normally overbuild that about 2 feet, 2.5 feet. So that'll get the construction grade up to 10.5 feet. When we get down to the area by Wilkinson Pump Station, that area we're looking at probably a design grade of about 10.5, 11 feet. We overbuilt that, we'll be in a range of anywhere from 12 to 13 feet with the construction grade.
And the existing levy we have now, that's going to stay there, correct?
That's correct. We did make an alignment change for the 5A1 reach. We actually moved it closer to the middle of the field. Mr. Parish President Lapine asked to inform y'all about the drainage canal. The drainage canal currently is adjacent to the existing levee. That drainage canal is now going to be relocated to the middle of the pasture land. on not only this project, but as well as the area that it goes from Myrtle Grove down to St. Jude. That drainage canal has to be constructed first so that we can make sure we can drain those properties properly. And then from there, we'll start construction with the levee. But we have to do the drainage canal first.
Mr. LaFrance?
Are we expected to maintain both levees?
From our perspective, and in accordance with the project partnership agreement, the parish is only responsible for any portions of the modified project or any of the new work or functional portions of the new work. So that means anything that we construct under the agreement that we have in place that was signed in June, this 22nd of June in 2012, that's what the parish would be responsible for. If the parish decides to maintain the existing non-fed levy, then it's basically up to the parish to decide that and whether they have available funds to do that.
Would you explain to the council how is the drainage canal is going to drain when it gets to the diversion?
Again, I would hope that we had someone from CPRA to answer that question. My understanding of the way that's supposed to work, Mr. LaFrance, is they are actually going to put a siphon in that area to transfer the water from one side to the next of the proposed diversion canal.
Dr. Gouy?
One last thing, and I know it's important that we bring this point out. Much of the property that's in question, that's going to be protected, and in regards to the drainage canal, will impact any port development. So my question is, with the Venture Global and any future stuff, that all of the locations of the drainage canals, all of that has been taken into consideration.
That's correct, sir. We have been working with Mr. Sanders to make sure that any prospects that they have are coordinated and that we are at least aware of could potentially be coming their way.
Any other questions from the table? From the audience? I need you to come up.
Hey, Anthony Goodjohn, Val Chase. Just was wondering if the right-of-way that you're purchasing is wide enough for a future increase in levee height. That was it.
Yeah. Good question, Anthony.
Yeah, well, again, with the funding constraints that we have, we are only purchasing what's necessary for the current planned construction. We cannot acquire lands for any potential future enlargement of the levee. If and when funding does become available at that time, then we'll have to address it at that particular time.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the table? From the audience?
Is Mr. Cooley coming up?
If you request them to.
Yeah, Mr. Cooley, he has a question.
You're not in wasn't in a queue. Now you're in a queue. Mr. Russo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cooley.
Good afternoon.
How are you today? Good.
Have my hearing aids on, too.
Oh, that's even better. The acquisition of the right-of-ways, my pet peeve is trying to get them donated, and I think you have said in the past that you're not a negotiator for that type of thing, and that we just simply acquire them. And if we have, as Dr. Gouy stated, resistant landowner, we expropriate them?
There are two things happening in connection with this particular levee reach and the other projects where you got a canal involved. We appropriate, so we take immediately upon approval of the ordinance the levee footprint lands that are required. For the canal, we ask for donations. To the extent they want to give us donations, we accept those. And we've approached all the landowners for donations on all these projects. For this particular reach, Phillips 66 has agreed to donate the property interests for both canal rights and for the levee footprint. We've asked others in this same reach, 5A1, if they would donate, and the answer is no. Now, what we do, the appropriation goes forward. So the levy imprint affects those property rights. Those are taken upon your approval of the ordinance. With respect to the canal rights, and with this, we survey all the impacted areas, and then we get appraisals on every tract. And then we approach the landowners and make an offer based on the appraised price and ask them if they want to proceed. And in connection with 582, we've got approvals from all the canal right owners to accept the offers that were made. With respect to 5A1, of course, we're not at that step right now. Once you approve this ordinance, the surveys then go forward. We identify the specific acreages affected, and then with respect to the appropriated lands, we make payments to those entities. With respect to the canal right property owners, we approach them, ask them to accept the appraised value. To the extent they do not proceed within a 30-day period to accept our offers, we have the authority under this particular ordinance that you're going to vote on to expropriate. I go forward with the expropriation proceeding, and we have a quick taking to the extent that we put the money, the appraised values, in the registry of the court at that particular time within a period of notice to those landowners. That expropriation occurs, and those land rights are then ours to go forward and issue the AFE to the Corps.
And where we stand today, as far as the entire project, I know at one time we appropriated some $12 million to allow you to go out and acquire right-of-ways because you kept coming to us and we said, wait, just do it all at one time, and you did that. And the reason I ask this is because of the cash flow issue that the finance department may have all of those right-of-ways for the rest of the project been acquired?
No.
And they have not been paid?
That's correct. We're proceeding now with 582. That's just about completed. We are going forward, I think, with 6A1. I haven't seen the final numbers yet. I don't know whether we've approached Tommy. We may have on some. I'm just speculating at this point on the numbers, and I don't want to do that until I see a final sheet. But what we're also engaged in right now is discussions with the state CPRA. They've agreed to provide us monies in the interim period to the extent that Tommy doesn't have the cash flow to write checks so I can proceed with the expropriation. We will get funds from the state, which will then be paid back to the state to carry that cash flow forward so we can accomplish the quick-taking expropriations and go forward with the AFEs.
And the revolving fund, I guess, is what the CPRA had publicized some time ago about a grant to the parish of $6 or $7 million.
That's correct.
And I think we all thought that was for projects, but actually that was for this project here to buy and acquire right-of-ways.
That's my understanding. We met with Ignacio Harouche of CPRA, and he's formulating the IGA or intergovernmental agreement right now for us to review to see how it's actually going to work. So that's the funding mechanism in the event we have a cash shortfall.
And the final question I have is that the reimbursement, since I know we're not getting reimbursed anymore, CPRA will be getting reimbursed. Is that correct? Or we still got to get reimbursed and give the check back to CPRA?
My understanding is we're going to get reimbursed and pay the funds back to CPRA to the extent that they've given us funds to take care of this matter.
And the Corps responding with a quick turnaround on the reimbursements?
They are getting a lot better. We now have a better understanding, and they do, as to the requirements of the parish to get it done as quickly as possible. Yes, the reimbursement timing has improved.
Thank you.
Mr. Blank?
Yes, sir. I hate to pick on you, but Rudy, could you please come up and explain to my colleagues about how the siphon project will work there underneath the diversion structure and how that's more cost effective than installing a pumping station in other places where they've already been installed around the state?
Absolutely. Thank you. Rudy Semino, CPRA Chief Engineer. I'm also the Deputy Program Manager for the Sediment Diversion Program. Thank you, Councilman Blank. So a gentleman from the Corps mentioned that the diversion canal will bisect the drainage area, and that the drainage in the canal will have to go around or under the current diversion alignment. We propose to do that with a siphon system. Basically, it's an inverted siphon. So we're familiar with the siphons on the levees. These work the other way. They go underneath the channel. The current, preliminary design is 6 8-foot culverts. So these are very big structures. They flow a lot of water. They can handle a lot of water. They're currently being designed to facilitate stop logs as well as sluice gates, so they can be closed in the event that they have to be maintained. They can also be flushed in the event that they are silted in or shoaled in. And they also have the proper facilities to prevent certain types of debris from entering them. So we're looking at the maintenance cost. Obviously, the other option is to facilitate a pump station in the area. That would be to actually drain that side of the polder with a pump station. I'm sorry, sir? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're looking at not only the initial cost of both features, but we're also looking at the life cycle cost of both features. Obviously, we want to recommend a series of alternatives that are the most cost effective. So both of those alternatives are being considered right now. We have not made any decisions. However, as the gentleman from the Corps mentioned, the siphon analysis is taking place so we can get a better feel for what that looks like from an initial cost as well as operations and maintenance for the long term.
So I have a question. You talked about operations and maintenance for the long term, and that's, and we'll follow up with that later. But one of the issues you mentioned, 6 8-foot culverts. I can remember about 3 months ago appropriating $250,000 to fill in 6 8-foot culverts on the east bank of Plaquemines Parish in our levee system. That came from all parish funds. So at what point, when the drainage canals become non-existent or not needed anymore on both the north and south side of the diversion, will the parish be responsible for filling in those culverts that got siphoned?
That would be something that we would recommend in our operations and maintenance plan.
Recommend to what? Close them?
Well, whether it be close them, they do have steel gates that do close them off. Like I said, there's 8 culverts and there's 16 gates on each time.
With all due respect, the 6 culverts, 8-foot culverts on the east bank have steel gates. When the steel gates close, and that's one of the issues, I think the oxygen levels are low enough because it's deep enough that it won't corrode the pipe. However, the engineers here disagreed with that assessment and said, although that those steel gates are closed and it may not get enough oxygen, it may collapse the levee. Therefore, we have to appropriate $250,000 to fill in culverts.
These culverts are concrete, sir. The 6 8-foot culverts are concrete.
So you wouldn't recommend having to backfill those culverts?
Well, we would have to look at that. Obviously, I don't have the answer today. We are very early in the analysis, but that would be a part of the operations, maintenance, and ultimately decommissioning, if possible, plans. So those answers we can provide to you once we've done the analysis. Yes.
You guys work in conjunction with the Corps of Engineers to make sure that every moving part to this particular project is worked through, and all of these issues of tripwires have been looked at?
Absolutely. As the gentleman from the Corps said, everything from tie-in with the levees to tie-in with the drainage canals is in close coordination with the Corps, as well as how the system operates with the new pump station down at Myrtle Grove at Wilkinson Canal, or if there's the possibility of another pump station, that would all have to be coordinated with the Corps. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Mr. Blank, are you finished?
I am.
Mr. Kognovich?
Them siphons, once you put them in, we're going to be stuck paying for cleaning and upkeep and all that.
The operations and maintenance costs will have to be something that are worked out with the parish, of course. We would have to determine if that's part of our operations and maintenance plan or yours. We don't have that answer today, but that's definitely a conversation we can have. Obviously, an agreement would have to be put into place, whether it be a pump or a siphon, who operates and who pays the maintenance cost.
We not asking for it, y'all just putting it on us. So I think y'all, if you're going to put it, you're going to pay for it, if it's up to me. And for the Corps engineers, why was the levee moved to a new position?
Well, there's several reasons why. We have a lot of levees left to construct, and as I mentioned earlier, we do have funding constraints. That's one of the reasons. But by moving the levee more toward the interior pasture land, we get into better soil conditions. We also shorten the alignment from about 2 miles as compared to following the existing levee alignment. that reduced the O&M costs. It also reduced our mitigation costs associated with construction. So from an overall perspective, this is what we could afford to do. And it also was a better engineering solution, as well as it reduced our mitigation requirement.
And moving it just cost us more money to buy property. You could have built it on the existing one without having to buy any?
Not necessarily, sir, because of the footprint that is necessary for the new levee, and there would have still been some land acquisition that would have been required.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes, in lieu to the pipes, we have 9 culverts on East Bank, and those were installed by the federal government, and we turn around by accepting the levies. We are responsible for adjusting what needs to be done by filling those culverts in. And they also took us out of the system, the federal system, because it wasn't done in a timely manner. But we didn't have any assistance from the Corps to do the project that needed to be done. So the only problem saying in the future is that whatever the Corps does, and CPRA does, they need to make sure that they also are partners in correcting whatever needs to be corrected that they put in place in posture, rather than putting all the responsibility on the Plaquemine Parish government to do that, because it's a non-revenue making project. It's something that for protection. We understand that we maintain it by cutting the grass and doing upkeep and surveying and constantly monitoring the levees. But when it comes to capital outlay projects like that, it's very expensive, where we in the state of emergency, financially wise, we are there by ourselves, and that's a serious problem. Being that it was a federal levy, and all of a sudden now it's not even warranted, it may not even be one. So that's my point. If we're going to make a commitment, I think the federal government and CPR need to be stand by that to make sure we don't lose the credibility that has been already established in all other future projects that we get into as a unit.
Mr. Russo?
The culverts that are going to be under the channel, how deep are they going to be?
So the current early design, once again, we have a lot of analysis left to do here, but we're looking at the diversion channel, which is the trapezoidal channel. They would be 5 feet below that bottom surface, so they'd be 5 feet below the actual excavated channel.
And that's about 45 feet?
But it depends on the location of where the canal lines up. It won't be 45 feet because the only part that's 40 feet in the channel is up by the river. The diversion channel actually shallows up closer to the 25-foot range as you get towards the back levee. So it would likely be shallower than 45 feet, somewhere on the order of 35 feet, I would say 35 to 40 feet, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. LaFrance?
And in that diversion, how tall the levee's going to be? Y'all levees.
Well, the levees that we are currently looking at right now are going to be built to hurricane standards. We're currently looking at doing the geotechnical borings to actually design those levees. So that hasn't been determined yet, but we want to make sure that those levees are as designed to be as substantial as the level of hurricane protection in that area.
How is our back levees going to tie into y'all levee, CPR levee?
Well, that's going to have to be engineered, sir. So once again, we'll be in coordination with the Corps, but at the end, ideally, it's a contiguous levee. It's a smooth transition, and it functions as one system.
So the river levee, which is essentially what it is, the diversion levee, is only at a 25-year?
I cannot speak to what the river levee is.
No.
But the diversion levee, yeah, it'll be
diversion levee,
equal or higher than the 25.
diversion levee is a river.
Yeah. So it would be equal or higher than the 25 level of protection. Yes, sir.
All right.
We have to design a highway bridge over the guide levees, so we want to make sure that we're conservative enough to where we have that gap. So we may actually build slightly higher depending on if the soils can sustain it and the design's substantiated. Yes, sir.
All right, thanks. Mr. Cotton, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask about.
I'm sorry, Mr. LaFrance wasn't done.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the bridge, if it was going over or through the wall. Because if it was going through, then you're going to stick us with 2 new gates. We're going to have to keep up. But if you're going over in the next 20 years, when a new bridge is needed, we're going to put a toll on that one too? Laugh, but it's coming. It'll come.
Mr. Mr.
The
LaFrance?
bridge is going over, to answer that question, sir, and it'll be sufficiently high to overtop the levee as well as allow maintenance vehicles to traverse the top of the levee as well. And the levee, the bridge itself is at this point, we don't envision any toll or replacing it. It's a 50-year project design, so I'm not sure there will be bridge maintenance that will be induced that obviously the state will pay for. But at the end of the day, bridge replacement is something that we'll have to look at down the road.
Rudy, what about gates?
Hold on one second. Just cue in, Mr. LaFrance.
Okay,
No, he's good.
Let him go, let him go.
No, he's good. Mr. LaFrance?
Mr. Wagner, could you please tell us who came up with the new footprint for the levees?
For all the levies, we work very closely with CPRAB as well as Plaquemines Parish Government, and of course our engineering staff to determine what's required for the project. So it's a collaborative effort.
Mr. Blank?
The question I had centered around the railroad bridge, and maybe I can get with you offline about this, but will it have 2 flood control gates? And who will be responsible, if so, for operating those and maintaining those?
So currently, we would also look to go over the levee with the railroad bridge as well. Our engineering team is currently deciding exactly where that crossing happens. Obviously, we've seen several alternatives to that. Some of them come all the way up to the highway. Some of them are a little further to the levee. We'll have to make those decisions as we get to 30% design. But at this time, it would be envisioned for the railroad bridge to come over as well.
Okay, got it. We are looking towards using, the diversion levee as a sort of a polder. I mean, I think it could really help to reduce risk. If that could be, it could be helpful.
All right, any further questions or comments from the table? From the audience? All right, with none, Mr. LaFrance, question?
No, sir.
All right, machine is open. Thank you, sir. It passes 9-0.
9A3. An ordinance to amend and as amended readopt ordinance number 10-161, which created a vessel traffic safety zone and established penalties and fines to be enforced by the U.S. Coast Guard and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
You have changes, Mr. Offer with substitutions? You want to read them or you want Ms. Barbers?
Okay. Under Section 1, we have the following revisions. We're changing, well, let me just read the whole paragraph as it's supposed to be. It hereby creates and defines a vessel traffic safety zone to ensure the safe operation of vessels 25 feet and above in Tiger Pass from Cypress Cove fish cleaning table to slip number 2 by the Halliburton dock in order to preserve public safety. In Section 4, with the revisions, it'll now read, fines for violations shall be no less than $250 for the first occurrence, with the fines increasing $100 for each subsequent violation. Section 3 will now read, it hereby authorizes and directs the parish president or his designee to post the appropriate signs referencing this ordinance number and the penalties from Cypress Cove fish cleaning table to slip number 2 by the Halliburton dock.
That's all? Mr. Kainovich, Mr. Blank, seconds. Offered, ask for a second. Second, Mr. Blank. Hold on one second. Go ahead, Mr. Kainovich.
Got numerous complaints about people fueling up at the Stone Fuel Dock. None of the boats are slowing down for them. And it's mostly offshore fishing boats, personal fishing boats, and nobody has respect for other people's stuff. And you sitting against a metal bulkhead and the waves hit you and it's crashing the boats against the bulkhead. Couple boats had holes put in it. 2 guys fell overboard. So it's time to get people to start respecting other people.
Thanks. Mr. Blake, you had a comment?
Yeah, a couple things. I've boated on the East Coast, West Coast, and in Europe, and I could say that, by and large, the boaters along the Gulf Coast, are pretty courteous, but that is starting to go away just in the time that I've been active. I was wondering if there is going to be any buoy or sign or anything added to the area to let folks know.
Gonna put up a sign about our cleaning station and slip to.
Got it. And what about enforcement?
Coast Guard said they'd enforce it, the sheriff's office and wildlife and fisheries.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Newberry?
Yes. I just want to thank Mr. Kognovich for changing that from 21 to 25 feet. Some of the fishermen really appreciate that change, so thank you very much.
But they should also take into account, they should still have respect for if somebody's there fueling up to slow down for them.
Dr. Gouy?
So this is going to actually lengthen the zone, the safety zone,
It's shortening it, really it's shortening it.
shortening it.
But nobody enforced it, nobody followed it, so I'm just bringing it back and getting it.
So on the I say the riverside, the side closest to the river, it actually started at Buds, and now it's Buds and everything else is not going to be
They not there
safety. No, but I mean the water's edge, the bulkhead and stuff. That's not going to be protected by this ordinance.
No,
Okay,
but there's no more dock.
Nothing's there.
So,
need a map, man.
I'll draw you one.
I got it right here, brother.
Any other questions from the table? From the floor? All right, with Mr. Kognovich, ready to move?
Yes.
All right, machine's open. And it passes 9-0. 4, please.
An ordinance approving a plan of re-subdivision of a portion of the Dale Diaz property, Boothville, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, into lots DD1 and DD2. Dale Diaz Division, Boothville, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, is shown on the plans and plat of survey by Dufresne Surveying and Engineering, Inc., dated June 30th, 2018, revised April 11, 2019. The owner having fulfilled all of the requirements of the subdivision and re-subdivision ordinance of the Parish of Plaquemines without cost to the Plaquemines Parish government or the Parish of Plaquemines, and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Mr. Kognovich?
I'll offer.
Kognovich offers, ask for a second. Second, Mr. Blank. Any questions or comments from the table? From the audience? Mr. LaFrance?
Next time, Mr. Conover,
A map.
a map.
Need one on yours too.
I have one.
Not on mine.
All right, no other comments from the floor? All right, with none, the machine is open. Passes 9-0. Item 5, please.
An ordinance approving a plan of re-subdivision of lots G through L, lots 1 through 9, a former 10-foot alley and 5 foot of a 10-foot alley, Square 1, Hodge Hutton Hero subdivision, Bell Chase, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, into lots 5A, Square 1, Hodge Hutton Hero subdivision, Bell Chase, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, is shown on the plan of re-subdivision by Dufresne Surveying and Engineering, Inc., dated November 29, 2018, revised April 2, 2019, and revised again on July 3, 2019. The owner having fulfilled all of the requirements of the subdivision and re-subdivision ordinance of the Parish of Plaquemines without cost to Plaquemines Parish government or the Parish of Plaquemines, and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Mr. Albro? Ask for a second. Second, Mr. Gouy. Any questions or comments from the table? From the audience? With none, Mr. Albro, you want to move?
Yes, this is just voting on the subdivision part of the zoning that we voted on a couple of meetings ago. And no word from any residents of any opposition.
All right, thank you. With no other items, machine is open for a vote. Passes 9-0. Item 6, please.
An ordinance approving a plan of re-subdivision of the property of Point Celeste Farms, Section 20T-17-S-R-26-E, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, shown on the map of re-subdivision lots 1-A, 1-B, and 2 into lots 2-A and 2-B. Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, by Landmark Surveying, Inc., dated February 16, 2018, last revised April 22, 2019. The owner having fulfilled all the requirements of the subdivision and re-subdivision ordinance of the parish of Plaquemines without cost to the Plaquemines Parish government or the parish of Plaquemines, and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Mr. LaFrance?
So offered.
Offered, ask for a second. Mr. Kokrovich, seconds. Any questions or comments from the table? From the audience? Mr. LaFrance? Ready to move?
Question called for.
Machine's open. Passes 9-0. Ms. Marcotte, go back to item 8, introduction to ordinances, resolutions. Ms. Newberry has one. Ms. Newberry.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I got shuffled in the paper.
Sorry.
Here it is. A resolution expressing the Plaquemines Parish Council support of the conceptual upgrade and expansion of Renata Trailer Park located on Highway 23 in Jesup Bend, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
All right, thank you. Ms. Marcotte, we're going to pass over item 7. I'm going to group that in with the rest of them. Let's go to item B, please.
Give me just a moment. A resolution to create a policy. So I can't get that one up right now. A resolution to create a policy wherein all anticipated land acquisition expenditures which are $100,000 or above must have a second independent appraisal before the purchase can be made, and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Mr. Blank.
Offer is read.
Offer is read. Second, Mr. LaFrance. I have one comment on that. We had spoke about amending that to $250,000. After speaking with the assessor's office, they thought $100,000 was low. I think you spoke with the assessor as well. Would be my recommendation for my support to amend that to 250 as opposed to 100. Mr. Gouy.
I'd like to ask the administration their thoughts on this, if you've given it any thought.
I'd like Mr. L.V. to comment.
Mr. Cooley.
Well done.
I guess my only comment I have to offer is, if you want to go two. It's going to cost you more. You don't necessarily get a difference sometimes in these appraisals. If you get some, if it's a major difference, then quite frankly, the council can make a decision whether it wants to offer a higher value or a lower value or in-between value. But whatever happens is the purchaser is going to see both appraisals. These are public records documents, and he's going to say, I want the higher number. And then you're going to be saying, well, why do I have two appraisals? I got to pay for two appraisals. So those are my comments.
Dr. Gouy.
So what you're telling me is that from your experience, and I can tell you've been around, you got a lot of experience at this.
Been around.
I know. You're welcome. When you see multiple appraisals, what you're saying is the difference, because of the formulations they used and the protocols that are used, the differences are really insignificant. Is that what you're saying?
Generally, if the same methodology is used, comparabilities are used by the same appraisers, the numbers won't be that different. However, if you get a cost appraisal versus a comparable one, you can get a significant difference.
There's no standard there?
There are standards, and you can challenge, in effect, you can, if in effect I'm assigned the appraiser or have the task of getting two appraisals, then I'm in contact with them and try to find out what's the fairest and best approach for the parish with respect to the methodology to use. And I've got some control over that because I could discuss with them whether they got a proper methodology or improper methodology. Now, so.
It would seem to me we would dictate the methodology.
Well, they're independent appraisers, so I can't dictate the methodology. In most cases, their methodology will be the same one, and usually those are comparabilities. But if you've got a unique situation, a different unique piece of property that requires some other way to look at it and to come up with a different methodology, those different appraisal values could be significant.
So, no matter what, the individual who's selling gets both appraisers.
That's
or
correct.
3 or 4, however many you do.
And may get his own.
And
may have even a different number. So, yes.
Got you. I'm done.
Mr. Russo?
Yes, I think that the $100,000 is actually a high number. The DOTD, when they acquire right-of-ways, they use $30,000, and they use different appraisals to compare. They even got people overlooking some of the appraisals in some of their process. So my issue has been that we don't use anybody but one appraiser. One appraiser is all we've ever used. So if you had a pool of appraisers, I feel more comfortable with that. But I support this for those reasons.
We have used more than one appraisal, and particularly on these levee projects when we've had some unique properties, particularly we've got borrow pits to look at and to have valued. And in these last reaches, we've had that occasion. We've asked the Corps to accept two appraisers for us because they're kind of different and unique types of appraisal issues. And so that's been approved. So we have used more than one. I've got to use two if I'm doing a quick taking under Title 38. Under 19.1 for sewage and drainage lines, I use one. And I'm only mandated to use one. And there are rules within the appraisal manuals can dictate that you can use a short type of appraisal methodology versus a long-term or a longer approach, and I'm not the expert in this area. But for 30,000 and less, you can use a different type of appraisal which costs less. But if you get in above $30,000, there are rules that say you got to have a full report. So there's some adjustments that are required, but yet I have used two on many occasions when I've expropriated.
Mr. Blank?
So where this is coming from is the land purchase that we did for the water intake. And sitting up here, I felt that this board was not as well informed as they could be to make that very important decision. There's a property that is much more useful, literally right across the street, that went for $550,000. We paid $830-something thousand. I felt that the highest and best use, a term that's used in appraisals, I don't think the appraiser was zeroing in on that. I think that lot was very narrow. There was a ferry adjacent to that tiny bit of water frontage. There's port activity south of there. Nothing could really be used for that property except our water intake. And so if this board would have been more informed, we could have maybe made a better decision or got a better deal. And so this is making sure that this governmental body has the information we need. Roussel mentioned earlier, $30,000 at the state level. I think that's a good best practice. I think it's a little low. I know it costs about $2,500 to $3,000 sometimes to get appraisals done. Maybe $100,000 is slightly low. It's 6% of the acquisition cost. But, our own purchasing department, when items are more than $999, just $1,000, they're getting 3 quotes. So I think this is more than reasonable. I'll let some of my colleagues can discuss if y'all want to go up a little bit, but I think 100,000 is pretty reasonable.
Ms. Newberry?
Oh, yes, like Councilmember Blink said, this was based on the last acquisition that we had to acquire. Do you know how much that cost the parish when we had to do that appraisal?
I'm sorry.
Do you recall how much? I'm sorry.
Would you mind repeating, because
Do you recall how much that appraisal cost the parish? Just,
that one may have been, was it 5,000? May have been in it. I can't recall exactly what, 4,500 or 5,000. We had, I'd asked for her to do it was a 2-part appraiser, to do some research initially, because it was a unique situation where we were talking about high ground next to the river and improvements thereon which belonged to the landlord as a consequence of what had happened over the years. So it was a step procedure, and I think the final cost may have been 5,000.
okay, so if we do acquire land, that's around $100,000. So do we have a percentage that we pay? What's the ballpark percentage on something like this?
Well, it varies. You get quotes depending on the nature of the acquisition, whether it's a large acquisition, whether it's a unique acquisition, whether there are several packages that you got to look at. So we ask for a quote. We'll ask several people for a quote in that case. In this particular case, on these levee projects, we're being reimbursed for everything. So, and they have to adhere to certain standards by the Corps on what they do and how they do it, and they're reviewed, and those appraisals get reviewed by the Corps and approved by the Corps, and then we get reimbursed on those. Same thing happens with other grant monies that we use. We have certain standards we'd have to adhere to. But generally, you can get a quote, and it varies depending on the appraisal issue involved.
Thank you.
Dr. Gouy?
So, and I'm going to ask the administration again in a minute what you think, but a pool of appraisers was mentioned. Is that something that people do? They have a pool of appraisers and they say, well, hey, we need some quotes on a piece of property. Is that how that works? Yeah, well, I know you're tired and all. You had to stand up that whole time and all the pressure we're putting on you.
I don't have a problem. Generally, I ask people that I've dealt with, who they might recommend as appraisers. Now, I've used several over the years. I've tended to use one in a particular reason because she's very familiar with the land issues in Plaquemines Parish and has done levee work for us, has done right-of-way acquisitions for sewer lines and for utilities and other matters. So
you do get quotes.
And I get quotes from, and the quotes are generally at a good number, a very reasonable number, better than I get other places.
Okay. So then, we're being asked to vote on a policy that has to be enforced by the administration. Does the administration have any objection to getting multiple quotes? Anyone from the administration? Yes, no, you don't care?
I don't have any objection,
Okay.
Dr. Gouy.
Thank you, sir.
In conjunction with the 2 appraisals or separate from, as opposed to?
The policy, the way it's written, the way the 2 appraisals at $100,000. That's what I asked. You answered it. Over 100, yeah. You answered it.
Okay,
Yeah, you did. You said you don't have a problem with it.
I don't have a problem with that.
Me either.
Mr. LaFrance?
If we have a pool of appraiser, I hope we use the one. I hope we use ones that didn't, the ones that didn't do that gave us that appraiser for that freshwater intake. Mr. Blank, I'm going to support you on this. I think $100,000 is a good number to work with. I just wish you would have done it a few months earlier.
Live and learn.
Mr. Kidovich?
Not like Mr. LaFrance, I'd like to keep that appraiser around because the port said they appraised the LSU property and it was $500,000. And if we paid for two acres up here, I think we ought to get that same appraiser down the road.
All right, any other questions or comments from the table?
I do want to bring to the council's attention that I think it's the administration, legal department's view that this policy should not apply to the core projects. And that's because that appraisal, that system is sort of a separate system from what we're talking about here. And it's likely that the Corps is only going to reimburse us on one appraisal. And the second point I would make is that the Corps is reimbursing the landowners 100% for the acquisition of these properties. So it's not a financial burden on the government, as are other projects. And so that's my comments.
Russo?
Whenever, I agree that some of your statement, but whenever I hear people talk about that the feds are paying for it, don't worry about it, it really gets to me.
Well,
because I pay federal taxes, and if we can be more efficient in the process, I would like to see us be more efficient. So when people tell me those type of things, well, the Corps is reimbursing, it's kind of like, don't worry about it. That worries me.
Well, I'm a federal taxpayer as well, so I hear what you're saying. My main point is that it's a different situation than the situation we had with the Price acquisition, and secondly, the reimbursements. These are all being reimbursed. So the second appraisals would likely not be reimbursed by the parish. I'm sorry, by the Corps. And secondly, it probably could delay the acquisitions, the ultimate acquisitions, and finalization of the acquisitions of these properties to move that project along. Because as soon as you have two appraisals, you're going to have tons of negotiating going on, and that could end up in court. It could delay the overall process, and I just want to make the council aware of that.
I understand the point about not being reimbursed for the second appraisal. I understand that part. I don't know if Mr. Blink wants to exempt the levy projects or not, but at this point, I'm willing to support it as it is, and we'll go from there and see what happens. And we can come back.
I might add, I guess I don't need a mic. What the heck?
You got a mic. Just step up to it.
With respect to Corps projects, the Corps only deals with approved appraisers, and it's the same thing with respect to certain other types of projects. Sometimes we get involved in CPRA. Sometimes gets us involved in making acquisitions on behalf of the levy districts for CPRA projects. They will mandate and they will determine who the appraisers are.
Right. The problem is, as been pointed out by Mr. Burris, is that in this ordinance, it doesn't differentiate about which project is exempt and what is not.
Correct.
So the Corps may only require one. The parish ordinance by law, if we pass this, requires two. The Corps is only going to reimburse us potentially for only one.
That's correct.
So the problem is that as this ordinance reads, it may cause some issues or delays or extra expenses, as Mr. Burris just pointed out, on levy projects or Corps-related projects, CPR-related projects, anything.
Yes, one way.
Okay, that's enough.
Yeah, one way to consider amending it is the funding source. If the funding source is purely from Plaquemines Parish government, then it would, it works the way you want it to work. If the funding source is from somewhere else, that funding source may dictate.
Look, we've gotten to that discussion for the last, 8 years, Benny. I mean, we talked about the funding source. The money comes to the parish government, therefore it's the parish's money. I don't care if it's a grant or not. It comes to us. We write the check. Tommy writes the check. We don't get a blank check from the federal government, from FEMA, that says, hey, we already signed it. You guys just do it. The appropriation comes from us. So the funding source is from us. And this ordinance prohibits, it puts a stipulation on doing one appraisal. It makes it where it's required to have two on any project.
That's great.
Well, let me say this. Mr. Blake, would you be interested in an amendment to make it just a local?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll offer the following amendment. A resolution to create a policy wherein all anticipated local land acquisition expenditures. Will that solve your problem?
Certainly these levy acquisitions are,
Ready, put the mic down, please.
certainly these levy acquisitions are local. I mean, I think we would have to distinguish a little better than that. My recommendation would be, something along the lines of unless otherwise agreed. Well, let me think about it for a minute. Can we pass for a second? I'll draft the language. In other words, if to the extent we have a state and/or federal partner.
Is it possible to defer this item, and you guys work on it and put the language in? Mr. Blank?
We'll defer it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blank. Item's been deferred. Ms. Marcotte.
9C, an ordinance to authorize and direct the parish president or his designee to do all things necessary and proper to remove the Empire Shipyard sheet pile wall and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Mr. Blank?
As read.
Mr. Blank, office is read. Can I get a second? Second by Mr. Bartholomew. Mr. Blank?
This is to remove an eyesore that no longer serves flood protection value. Scrap prices are up right now due to the tariffs. It's a good time to move on this.
Any questions or comments from the table? I have a question for the administration. Do we own this?
We don't know. We're still trying to figure it out who owns this.
All right, so if this ordinance passes and authorizes y'all to go do it, and you do it,
We could be in a lot of legal trouble.
Well,
Never mind.
Okay.
Miss,
But I mean, we've asked to work with, but you've talked about
I have not seen the ownership documents. It's the engineering department's impressions that we do own it. So there will be a little more research that needs to be done. Obviously, if we don't own the property, we can't enforce the ordinance as written. We would come back to the council and suggest that this ordinance be rescinded if in fact we can't remove it. However, if we do own it and legally we can go on the property and remove this, we'll obviously follow the ordinance.
Mr. Albro?
Yes, administration, is there an estimated cost on this? They said scrap it up, prices are high. What would the cost be to the parish government? Estimated.
You're asking me or the administration? Okay, so I spoke with the administration about this a few weeks ago. Kirk, you and I spoke about it in your office. You said you were reviewing whether it was our property or not. I assume that at this point in time, that would have been, that information would have been secured. And yeah, that's that. You know, I thought y'all were working on this. I haven't heard anything back.
We have been working on this, Mr. Blank, actively. You know, we had a little bit of a disaster that came in between.
Totally understood.
Okay, so we're just telling you, we'll follow whatever you pass. But again, we don't know whose property it is. We don't know how much it's going to cost. It's not just, it's sheet piling that's 45 feet in the ground. So if you're asking us with my 6-member heavy equipment people to remove this, we'll get to it.
So, you know, as discussed in the past, we had a plan to handle this through purchasing, through an RFP, floating that out to interested parties who do scrap metal to come in, dig a little bit, cut it off right below the mud line. Purely administrative, not our guys out there going to this. A brief check of the assessor's website is absolutely in the Duluth Canal right away. You know, that's where we're at. If you'd like me to defer it again, I'll go ahead and do it.
That's our administration's call.
Your call, Mr. Blank.
All right, let's defer it, and we're going to set a meeting for sometime next week to discuss it.
All right, item D, Ms. Marcotte.
An ordinance authorizing Plaquemines Parish government on behalf of and as the Grand Prairie Levee District as grantor to issue a pipeline right-of-way agreement of an existing pipeline covering Grand Prairie Levee District property located in the Grand Bay Field, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, to authorize the parish president to execute a pipeline right-of-way agreement and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
Ms. Bartholomew? I don't know. Any questions or comments from the table? Yeah, we got a second. Mr. Alba seconds. From the table? From the audience? Mr. LaFrance, you have something?
Yeah. It says $97.45. Does this seem to be cheap, or is this the going rate?
I guess let's back up. No, it's for 97.45 rods. Our rental value, as stipulated in the ordinance, is $20 per rod. This particular pipeline is about 1,618 feet. 1,618 feet. The yearly rental will be $1,900.49. It'll be almost $1,950 per year. And the rental value is stipulated by a pipeline ordinance. This is 4 inches in diameter. It's an existing pipeline.
And that is the going rate?
That is the rate as stipulated in our ordinance, yes.
I wonder how much Delta Development is getting for per rod.
I don't know. Generally, pipeline companies pay on a rod basis one time, and that's it. We're charging an annual rental per rod, which is a lot higher than most pipelines can get. So we're in effect, if looking at comparables a long time ago, our rentals are higher because it's a yearly rental rather than a one-time payment.
And what you say is $1,900 a year?
Yes, $1,950 a year. It's a 10-year lease.
Thank you.
All right, other questions or comments from the table? From the audience?
Yeah.
Mr. Bartholomew?
Yeah, I'm in the queue.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Anytime.
This is the actual thing we were talking about for revenue source that we can look at down the road to go back and review all our permitting and what we can do to increase our revenues from that by increasing the permitting, the uses of that. That's just for us to start dealing with that and start looking into those directions. I think we need to do that as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. If nobody object, call for the question.
Question's been called, no objection? All right, with none, machine is open. And 6D passes 8-1. We have one abstention from District 9. Item E, please.
An ordinance to amend the 5-year capital improvements plan for the replacement waterline Highway 39 project and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
Mr. Bartholomew? Offered. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. LaFrance. Any questions or comments from the table? For what? This is John's? No, I'm on F. Yeah, I know. I know we're on E. All right, Mr. Bartholomew, any,
Comment is that we got this grant and we're trying to get another 30,000 to make it work so we can kind of cover the deficiency that exists with that water line. They keep breaking it every time we apply pressure. It's not necessarily that's going to complete the whole area need to be done, but that eliminate that particular area that's constantly breaking and the line is decayed. And if we ever, hopefully God, that we don't have a fire, anything of emergency nature, that we can still provide the service that's needed for the protection in that area. So I'll be looking for that. Hopefully that'll mend some of the issues at hand, the emergency issues.
thank you. Any other questions from the table? From the audience? All right, with none, the machine is open. Passes 9-0. All right.
I want to thank the administration for taking the effort of trying to work towards that. to light now that we're all trying to resolve an issue that we've been trying to deal with for the last several years. So I want to thank Mr. Lapina and the administration for doing that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bartholomew. Ms. Marcotte, item F, please.
An ordinance to amend the 2019 general fund balance designation and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
I'd like to offer with the additions in line 10 of $2,200,000. In line 13, $2,343,087. Ask for a second as amended. Second by Mr. Albro. Any questions or comments from the table? From the audience? This is basically the fund balance designations, the transfer of the funds per Mr. Serpez's request at the budget hearings of approximately $4,543,087. Right? All right. There's no other questions or comments from the table, from the audience. Machine is open for a vote. And ordinance passes 9-0. All right. On items G, H, I, J, and also item 7, we're going to limit, per council rules, audience participation to 2 minutes per comment. We'll start with item 7. If you want to go with 7, I'm going to open that for discussion only, but Ms. Marcotte, and please just go ahead and queue in so I can get you on a queue. If you have any comments, 7, please.
9A7, an ordinance proposing amendments to the Charter for Local Self-Government of Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
I'll offer for discussion purposes only. Ask for a second. Mr. Gouy seconds. Mr. Russo?
My only question is, in general, of the items that you just read, it was announced that these items will be voted on at the next meeting in Point LaHash?
Yes, sir.
So today is only airing them out?
Yeah, today, just for transparency purposes and to make sure the public has the most ample opportunity to be able to have these discussions, it was introduced at the last meeting and will be voted on August 8th. I think, Mr. Burris, August 8th is the deadline to have this voted on in order to have it on the November ballot.
To go before the bond commission in order to get it on the November ballot, correct?
Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Gouy.
Yeah, I've asked in an email, one of the items that seems to not be addressed in this is salary structure. And it's a question that's going to be asked. If I'm voting on an amendment to our charter and I'm changing the structure of the districts, what am I going to pay you? We know what the salaries are now under the 9-member, so I think that we need to discuss that and bring that up before October 8th. I mean August 8th. I think that's a critical point that could make or break it.
Yeah. On all these items, I mean, in reference to that, for comments from the council, Mr. Burris, does the administration devise some type of meeting procedure to have discussions between administration and individual council members or council members in smaller groups?
Yes, we're going to have members. The firm who drafted these proposals for us is Foley Udell. This is kind of their expertise in their area. So they're going to come next week and have meetings. I don't have the exact times yet, but we're working on that with both council and administration to go over this.
All right. I mean, this is pretty serious business, obviously, for the parish government. So if you could just make sure we expedite those meeting times and dates, and even have multiple meeting times and dates. That way, if that's follow-up questions or whatever, so when we go to the table on August 8th, it's amended in its best fashion. I mean, I understand there probably will be potential for amendments at the table, but if you would, because we only have a week and a half, 2.5 weeks.
Correct.
All right. Do you want to explain this particular item to the council, just so we're all...
we were asked to, the legal department was asked to basically draft a proposition to be put before the voters, and essentially that is to go from a 9-member, single-member district council to what's known as a 5-2, which is basically 5 single-member districts, like you currently have, with 2 at-large members. And so those persons will be voted on by the parish at large. Something similar to what St. Bernard and St. Mary Parish have is they actually have a restriction where the 2 at-large districts are divided up in a geographical region, and so a candidate must reside within a certain area or within that district in order to run for that seat. Although they reside within that certain territorial jurisdiction, they are actually voted on by the parish at large. So that's what you see in section 1.03 in Exhibit A. Obviously, a lot of these changes have to do with a supermajority and/or quorum. So if you were to overrule a presidential veto, obviously 2/3 doesn't work anymore. So a supermajority vote would be 5-7. And so in 3.07, the disability section, the legislative powers section, there's a special requirement when you sell, lease, or otherwise alienate property. Currently a 2/3 vote of the council is needed for that. Obviously, that will change to 5-7. The other major significance that you all really need to be aware of is that currently, after serving 2 terms, you're ineligible to run again. The way this charter change was drafted was that you would only be prohibited from running for the seat you currently occupy. And so, in other words, if you're a single-member District 1 and you want to run for the at-large seats, then you're able to do so. You wouldn't be prohibited from doing so. So that's going to have to be something that you all decide how y'all want to present that to the voters, because that was adopted at a special election held on July 16th, 1994. And so that is something very significant. The other significant thing, and this ties into sort of what other parishes do, the council chair and the council vice chair will be the 2 at-large members, and they will rotate. I think it's 2-year terms or 1-year term. They'll rotate, and so your chairpersons and vice chairperson will always be an at-large member.
And just to be clear too, on these 5 items, that this is not a vote to actually make the charter change or a vote to actually impose a millage. But it is a vote to allow it to get to the bond commission to then be put on the ballot in November. So it's not a vote for or against the actual thing to be implemented immediately after the vote. It's to get it to the ballot for the vote of the people.
Correct. So when the council votes next week on these matters, you'll basically be voting to submit these propositions to the ballot. I'm sorry, yeah, put on the ballot for November, and the people at large will vote. And for all of these propositions, it only takes a majority vote, not a super majority vote. It takes a majority vote to both change the charter and adopt the millages and adopt the off-track betting.
All right, Dr. Gouin.
Rennie, I think it's important when we talk about the term limits provision that if someone is in, let's say, District 1, they run their 2 terms, and then they could run for at-large. They could run for at-large for 2 terms. At the end of that, they could go back and run for District 1. So the term limits is for that particular entity, whether it be a single-member district or an at-large.
Correct. And what I've seen in other parishes as well is that they limit, even with setups like this, they'll say 3 terms. And so, in other words, as a single-member district, you would serve 1 term 4 years, and you could take a shot at large and serve 2 terms at large, but then after that 3rd term, you're done. You couldn't run for any other seat. And so would be a minor change in the language that's presented. So If the council is concerned about what we see in Baton Rouge, where the members just kind of flip-flop from House to Senate to avoid sort of the term limits for each house, because in Baton Rouge, each house, the term limits are for each house. So if you're a rep, you serve out your terms, you can run for the Senate, and obviously you see that a lot of that flip-flop going back and forth. So if that's a concern for this body, a potential change would be that you're only allowed to serve 3 terms on the council, period. And it doesn't matter whether you're a single member, district member, or an at-large member.
I think that's up to each of us as individuals as to our perception of term limits. Is it really limited or is it not? And so any amendments to that's going to be from whoever at the council. We'll discuss it next week as to the pros and cons. And the other argument is the voters are term limits. You get voted out, you're termed out. So it's an argument, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But I think we need to make a decision on what to put on the ballot.
Yes, sir.
I yield.
Mr. Blank?
Oh, I think Rennie just answered some of my questions.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the table? All right, from the audience? All right, with none, G, please.
A resolution ordering and calling for a special election to be held in the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, to authorize the levy of a special tax therein, making application to the State Bond Commission in connection therewith, and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
I'll offer for discussion only. Ask for a second. Dr. Gouy, seconds. Administration?
This is one of the 3 millage propositions that we drafted for you all to review. This one is the ferry proposition, and it's asking the voters to approve 3 mills to be used exclusively for ferry operations.
Dr. Gouy?
So we're talking operation only, no replacements?
No, yeah, well, let me apologize. I'll read what the ballot said, what the proposition says. It says, for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, improving, maintaining, and operating ferries and ferry services in the parish. So it's a pretty broad grant of authority.
It is, and the projected numbers would zero out the ferry cost to government? Pretty close, huh?
Yes, sir, although I defer to finance.
I think so.
It would be close. It wouldn't zero it out completely. I think it was 2.9 million. I believe that would,
Very costly.
Yeah, the proposition's expected to raise 2.955 million.
right, and your ferry cost, minus the fees that we received, it's right over 3 million. So it would be close. It wouldn't negate the deficiency, but it would be close.
Well, one of the things on any of these millages, to me, is that we need to be very specific on what the money could be spent on and not make it the will of the council to change where the tax money is going by finding a loophole. And I mean, we know what we're talking about. So ferry services, I mean, would that include only the boats, or would that be the on-ramps and off-ramps? And I think we need to be real specific on that. So during our discussion the next week or so, we need to zero in on what are the importance of what the language should be on all of these, the specific language.
Correct. That's fine.
Yeah, because the voters are voting with their thought that it's for this, and then 3 or 4 years down the road, we said, let's add this to it. We want to prevent that from happening again and create a lot of heartache.
Mr. Blank?
Yeah, I think we have some tough choices with the ferries coming up, one of which is if we're going to consolidate the ferries to one set of boats in one location in the parish, and we have a big decision to make coming up soon about the federal highway money. Does that need to be included in this discussion? Should we be talking about that? Should that be wrapped in? Should the people get to decide if we're going to have one ferry landing or not?
I think everything's open for discussion now. I mean,
Sure.
it's valid.
I think that
Let's,
this entails is just the money.
Of course, yeah.
would be the next step, would be, what is the feasibility of doing what you're talking about? And then I think we'd bring that up for discussion.
I almost think it's the step we need to be taking first. I think there's a lot of questions, what do we need to be doing to, find efficiencies and increase revenue, decrease costs, maybe consolidation of the ferry landings, those types of things before we get into the discussion whether we, want to ask the people to tax themselves for that service. And I understand we're on a time crunch here to get this, on the ballot, but I'm wondering, have those discussions been taking place?
I've had those discussions for 5 years since I've been on this council. Well, 4.5 years since I've been on this council about what's the most cost-effective, efficient way to move the same amount of people over, back and forth. And, I've had it, and I can't get answers. Mr. Bartholomew?
And there was and I don't know if it's still around, but there was a ferry consolidation, study that was done, and, we can certainly provide that to you. But it was going to require, that particular study was going to require a bond, and so, I think there was going to be some expense there.
The discussion is, and we've had this discussion before, is that anytime we want to raise a millage or a sales tax, have we as this body done everything possible, like Mr. Bling just said, to make sure that we've already cut as much as we can, and we can't go any further. And that's why I thought the budget hearing was a great opportunity for Tommy to go ahead and tell us that we're broke now, but we're going to be more broke, if that's a word. But, I introduced legislation on the administration's behalf to take out a loan. I hope you guys go back and take a look at the budget hearing meeting, but they want to get a credit card is what they want to do in order to pay people, pay people this year. So, Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes, I'm very much concerned with the attitude about us passing a millage for ferries, but yet we're still imposing a tax on the people for the ferry. So then you have two taxation going on for one item. And to me, that's not good representation. The other thing is that we have to look into consideration of what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to isolate services or delete services, having people have opportunity, especially on the lower end from the east side, to be able to go down to the hospital in Port Suffolk, the medical office in Port Suffolk, the drugstores in Port Suffolk, the comprehensive drugstores in Port Suffolk. Now, you think I'm going to drive all the way up to Bel Air, wherever y'all anticipating on putting the ferry, then drive all the way back down to Port Suffolk, then come all the way back up, then go all the way back down to Pond Lake. That's not cost efficient at all. That's not effective at all. So whenever we make any decisions, we need to take in consideration the people. This is the people's government. And I don't think that the operation of that ferry caused the deficit that we're in today. I don't believe that. We used to be still is being subsidized through road royalty fund, which could be used anywhere in the budget. Anywhere in the budget. But prior to this, it was designed for ferry usage in the ferry operation, which always was more than what we spent on operation. And so, see, it all depends, not only with that, but everything else that we're going to do. And so we have to look at what are we trying to do. If we're trying to break out even, trying to provide services or to improve services, I don't have problems with that. But if we're going to create a hardship for the people that's being taxed, I have serious issues with that. Serious issues. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Newberry?
Unfortunately, Jefferson Parish has those issues. Lafitte has to go all the way up Barataria to get to a hospital. So, yeah, well, unfortunately, sometimes those situations happen. But anyway, we did a ferry audit in 2018, and can the administration tell me if they followed up on any recommendations from that audit? Or are y'all aware of any of that?
I'm not aware of that. of the recommendations.
Okay, so we do have some recommendations. Maybe Mr. Russo can kind of broaden on that. He was part of that committee.
Mr. Russo?
What we will do is forward you the audit for your review, and you can look at it and see what recommendations that you feel are warranted, and we can talk about it after you review the audit.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Gouy?
In response to Councilmember Blink, some good points. It's whenever we're under a timetable, we tend to act, or a budget crunch. The information comes to us, and all of a sudden we start to act, and that's good. But I think that the action should be more of a consolidated action. And I think you mentioned it, Richie, is that we look at everything. We look at everything as far as what impacts are we having with budget cuts, with revenues that come in, expenses. So that's not going to happen in a week. Now, we got to vote on this next week. So it's really important for us to get with the administration and really go through all of our concerns and our constituents' concerns, because we don't want to be viewed as having a piecemeal approach to plug some holes when the water's still coming in somewhere else. And I think we can get to that point. I sincerely do. I think with all of us, we can get to that point. But I don't think we can get to that point before August 8th, unless we meet every day, all day, and really get our thought processes in line. So I think that's something we need to keep in the back of our minds, is that when we're voting on this thing, are we really doing a consolidated government overhaul to where we're really going to be as efficient as we can, or do we need to plug some holes now? According to the budget report, we're leaking pretty bad. And if we don't do anything this year, we still have more time to bring everyone together to come up with a consolidated plan, but we missed that deadline. We missed that November election. Can we do that? If we miss it, what's our next timetable to do that, and how broke are we going to be in the meantime? I don't think we have those answers yet. At least I don't have those answers. I hadn't been given anything. I yield.
I just, one question, because I think Tommy has the answer. Not that this has anything to do with if it passes or not, but at the budget hearing, do you anticipate us having to use a loan this year to pay bills?
I'm hoping we don't.
Do you anticipate us having to take out a loan in order to pay bills this year?
The problem is, I do not know, like with this little storm, how much this is going to cost us. Now, this is using money that we had to pay payroll, insurance, everything. That's taking money away from it. I was going to be close. I showed you the graph that, I mean, by December, we'd be pretty much out of money in the pooled account.
Right.
Without this. So all I'm asking for is an opportunity to get something out there. If we don't have to use it, we don't have to use it. It doesn't cost us any interest. So if we don't take out any money, my concern is that we have another small storm or large storm, God forbid, that's going to, will wipe us out.
I guess my point of the question was this, is just to clarify or expand on Mr. Goui's statement, is that it's not that we're going to be in a crisis. We're in the crisis.
Right. We've been in a crisis.
Right.
I mean, I've been bringing this up for 5 years now.
Okay, so this isn't anything new. This isn't something that we've been, hey, thinking about maybe, whatever. We've been knowing since the day that myself and Mr. Lapine and Mr. Roussel, Mr. Bartholomew walked into that
Correct.
library in 2015, was given a budget. We've been in that crisis. It's that day.
We've been in that crisis, and we've
known.
We've been able to bail ourselves out with FEMA money that would come, was coming in, with different things that with the BP money. BP money bailed us out, But even with the BP money, when we do the budget for 2020, we're still going to be short. Think about when we did the budget for this year. We had to go back in the bond indemnities and in emergencies and take out $4.5 million to cover the budget shortfall. Now, that was after the BP money was already in. That's with us using that money. So it's going to be the same thing. I mean, unless we can find a way to cut expenses, which we couldn't do last year, and there's no additional revenues, then we're going to have a shortfall of close to $5 million when we try to do the budget this year, using the same exact revenues and expenses. So, I mean, it's just the way it is. We either cut expenses or we find additional revenues. Now, even with this, if you bring it to the people and they vote on it, this is not going to go on the tax rolls of 2019. We won't see this effect until the tax rolls to the next year. So we'll still be dealing with this even if this thing passes. But, something's got to be done. I mean, we just can't keep using our fund balances.
All right, anybody else from the table on this particular item? From the audience? Go ahead, Mr. Moore, sorry.
If folks stick around for my discussion, 10F, hopefully we can get to some of these answers before.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, with none, we'll move to the next item, please. H.
A resolution ordering and calling a special election to be held in the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, to authorize the levy of a special tax therein, making application to the State Bond Commission in connection therewith, and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
I'll offer and ask for a second for discussion only. Mr. Albro offers a second. Mr. Burris, which one is this one?
This is similar to the ferry, except this is for recreation. The 1 mil is expected to generate $985,000. I believe the ferry budget's slightly over that. However, the collections may more or less even out for a balanced budget. Once again, I'd have to defer to finance on that, but.
All right, any questions from the table on the recreation one of 1 mil? Dr. Gouy?
Tommy, I looked at that big book you give me that I never understand, and I always call you.
Yes.
I found a line that said recreation. It was about $1 million. Did that include everything that's here in regards to parks and playgrounds and the programs for the kids? I mean, the actual athletic program?
Well, if you're looking at the budget book, that's what you're looking at?
Don't ask me what color they all the same color.
Well, if you're looking at the budget book, each department is separate. Each department is separated. So if it just says recreation, then that would just be for recreation. You'd have to look at another one for parks. There's another department for parks. There's one for, tennis courts, and there's one for things like that. I do have a number on that, if you just bear with me just a second.
While you're doing that, to get to Mr. Blink's point about the ferries, we did an audit in 2018 of the ferry system. That's, I spoke to Mr. Duke and actually Ms. Newberry about it to make some different modifications or improvements to that particular system. That's why I asked for for the recreation audit, because here's something that we lose money every year in. We take in a lot less money than we actually put out. To find out if we need to raise fees. I mean, our fees are still the lowest probably in the state, just to be able to, maybe get away with not having to do a mill if we do a cost-benefit analysis on park rentals, on recreation fees, on equipment usage. We hear horror stories that we dish out $200-300 worth of equipment on a $25 registration fee with no insurance policy that we're going to get it back. So that was my point there. But you got, I think he's got.
To answer your question, I included recreation, athletic fields, parks, and pools all together, and the budget for 2019 is $1,020,000. That's for all together. The revenues that those things bring in is roughly $70,500. That's so. And I think the recreation fee is $20 for registration.
So going back to Councilmember Black, I think that we need to look at other sources of revenue as far as recreation usage. And then again, with the language here, would this include buildings such as the Belchase Auditorium, the Burris Auditorium, Braithwaite Auditorium, the way the language is written, because we may use them for recreational facilities.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I think we need to change the language then, sure.
Recreation.
Yeah. You got me with a...
The problem is so Corey and I is working on an ordinance for the building fees, and I can tell you from the buildings that we have, the average cost for building upkeep, maintenance, everything, for each building, we probably have 10 for rental use, is probably about $50,000 to $60,000 per building. So there goes your million total.
In the hole?
Yeah, absolutely. So there goes your million right there, if you include the buildings, because the building rental rates, or you can rent the whole auditorium pretty much for a repass for $5. Now it costs us how much in electricity and everything else, plus the manpower, because you have to have 2 people there at the whole time. You know, and then if it's on a Saturday or Sunday, whatever, is that overtime or what is it? So there's some serious issues.
Well, that's my point, and with the recreation tax, we have to make sure it's for recreation, and we can't lump in the buildings just because we may play bingo in it. Well, that's recreation, but it's not meant to pay for that. It's paid for the stuff that we use, the kids use, and adult leagues and stuff if we have that. And we need to be specific, otherwise we're going to run into the same problem.
The language says acquiring, constructing, improving, maintaining, and operating parks, playgrounds, recreation centers, and other recreational facilities in the parish, together with the necessary furnishings, fixtures, and equipment therefore. The issue is it's always going to be a matter of interpretation. As a parish attorney, I'm going to recommend that this be conservatively read, because the last thing we want to do is get in trouble for spending tax dollars on things that the people did not approve. The problem is, short of, you're always going to play this game with language, short of specifying each ball field, each park, each facility, there's no way to get around this language. So, I think this is fairly well written. I would interpret it to not mean the auditorium, and my recommendation would that we read it conservatively. But short of actually naming each facility, I can't promise you.
You get a directive from the council to include an auditorium and use those funds for an auditorium, and you get a directive from here, those changes, that money would have to be spent on that auditorium.
You're asking me if this passed, if you gave me a directive,
We could change departments. It's been done add a department to this department, added this department to recreation. I want to not let that happen again.
correct. Well,
We'll talk about next.
Hang on, Mr. Batal. Hang on, Mr. Batal. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gooey. Mr. Blink?
Sure. So, Tommy, to be clear, if this were to be voted in by the people, would the funding come at the end of 2020 or 2021? I just want to hear it.
No, the funding would not be in the 2020 budget, would not be available for the 2020 budget. I call it's on the assessment roll for 2020, but that wouldn't go into effect until the next year.
Got it.
I do want to say this, though. If something like this passed, we would set this up like we do the other special revenue funds, road maintenance, solid waste, things like that. We would put recreation in its own fund. Now it's going to have a funding source that should pretty much cover the expenses. Same thing with ferries, same things with, any recreation, any other one we would do like this. We would put it in its own fund, give it its own funding source, its expenses would go there. And so the way we would benefit is those things would come from the general fund and go into that fund, because now it's got money to pay for it.
Got it.
So that's the way we would look at it. So any departments, whether it be, recreation, athletic fields, parks, pools, we would take all of those departments and put them into that fund now.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Kognovich?
With the wording, didn't a few years back, people voted on a fire tax that was supposed to be equipment and manpower, and we built firehouses with it?
I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to research. I'd meet with you after and we can discuss it further. I don't have any information on that.
All right, any other questions or comments on recreation millage from the table? From the audience? All right, with none, aye, please.
A resolution ordering and calling a special election to be held in the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, to authorize the levy of a special tax therein, make an application to the State Bond Commission in connection therewith, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
I'll offer for discussion. I only ask for a second. Mr. Albro seconds. Mr. Burris?
Once again, this is a 5 mil to put to the voters of the parish in the November election. These 5 mils would be used basically for levy and drainage, and the language is for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, improving, maintaining, and operating levees and flood protection, surge protection, and drainage works within the parish. If you recall, there was an ordinance on the table before that the council, acting as the governing authority of the various levy districts, has the actual constitutional authority to adopt a 5 mil tax to pay for levies. It was the will of the council, had heard from several members that that they would not approve any tax without it going to a vote of the people. So this is putting that proposition to the people and letting the people vote on this issue. And this is probably the biggest concern for the administration. As we just had conversations earlier, you heard from the Corps of Engineers, you see all these projects going up. And for many of these projects, the parish is partially, I would argue, on the hook with the state of Louisiana for the operation and maintenance of these levees. And so as more of these projects come online, it is going to be more and more of an expense. And we have an obligation under the PPA signed between the Corps, CPRA, and the parish to maintain these levees to federal standards. And obviously, if we do not maintain them to federal standards, we could lose certain certifications, which have vast implications for insurance and all kind of other purposes. And so this is to present 5 mils to the people for them to vote on this issue.
Mr. Russo?
Yes, I know this is after the fact, but all 3 items on the agenda today say the exact same thing. So if I was sitting in the audience just looking at the agenda, I wouldn't know which item was which, whether it's a recreation tax or a levy tax or if it's whatever. So, you know, I don't know if this is the standard language that the Bond Commission requires, but I know it's too late to do that because we've already been introduced, but.
Well, it's just a preamble. If you look at the whole ordinance, you're very able to see that which
But
tax
I'm
is
talking
which.
about for the person who picks up an agenda,
Yeah.
has no clue. And if the council members sitting up here look at that, if I asked one of them, what does H do, what does I do, without going to the full ordinance, they wouldn't know either. Just a point.
Yeah, this was the recommended language by Foley and Udell, who handle these matters across the entire state. So, point taken.
Ms. Newberry?
5 mil is a lot. And my point is, we need to see more of a cost analysis. What it would cost us on a daily basis? How many miles of levee do we have? You know, so I mean, I would hate to see us collect 5 mil and it only costs us 3 mil. You know, so I would like to see the public know what they're voting for to see if this is even worth $5 million. It's a lot of money. It's a big, big tax, and I know it's somewhere along the lines of tax we need. So I would like for the administration to show some kind of cost analysis.
I believe that's currently being developed.
What's that? We don't have a lot of time.
I understand, but what the council members should understand, this is to simply balance the budget. This isn't going to be increased services. And so it's a matter of prioritizing what we're prioritizing, and levies is the priority. And so as those expenses goes up, the administration and the council, that is a major priority. There are other things that are less important. And so, but once again, this is to provide with that $7 million, was it $5 or $7 million budget shortfall? That's just to provide the existing services where we currently are. And I think we have over 214 miles of levees.
But to Ms. Newberry's point is that you don't get elected. We do, and then we elect you, or we appoint you. Well, we authorize it. Our job is to make sure that our constituency, by looking at the due diligence, looking at the data, that we can sit up here with a straight face and say, we need this money because, or we need you to vote on it because we've done everything that we can do. We've looked at every piece of data that you have provided to us. It can make a decision, you know, and that's our point is that, you know, we need to make sure that every rock has been turned over. I mean, I think for the most part it has been. Just been up here for 5 years, but I mean that's just my opinion. But we have a lot of new council members, you know. So I think that's the point. Dr. Dewey.
Yeah, I echo that we need to know a total. What does it cost us now? And we're going to use this money to supplement what we're already doing, or we're going to use it to substitute what we're already doing. And so we need to be able to just say that. And the other thing is, and I was talking to a council member, Roussel, is it possible on the language that's on the agenda to put in parentheses, recreation, levies, in order to identify it as part of the preamble?
Yeah, of course. If this council right now wants to consider these amendments and make that amendment in the preamble now, certainly there's nothing that I'm aware of preventing us from doing that.
It's a point well taken. You're sitting in the audience and you see the same language, and it needs to be done. So when we're done, Bo, we can amend each one of these just to put the word in parentheses after the preamble.
Our attorney says it's allowable. He wants to put it in.
Excuse me, would y'all mind me suggesting something? I could just put on the agenda itself, in parentheses, this is for whatever, if that's easier than amending it.
Perfect. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes, I hope that when you do the overview of the levy situation, you include the East Bank, because right now we lost our accreditation because we didn't fulfill our obligation according to the Grand Prairie Levy District promise that we'll maintain levies. And we lost that credit because we didn't follow that law. So that means the people from Phoenix South does not have a certified federal levy because of that.
We'll work with Mr. Beshel to get that included.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Mr. Bartholomew. Yeah, that was news to me because I can remember sitting up here for 4 years, yelling and screaming about it, saying that we're going to lose the accreditation. That's news to me, and I'm sorry to hear that. That's you know, you only been here for 6 months, not your.
Yeah,
when that was your issue, you know. But that's pathetic.
Well, no, it's a parish issue.
It is a parish issue, but we fought for that. I know, but we fought for that on this council for the last 4 years.
That's right, we did.
Mr. Blank.
Yeah, when that analysis takes place, will movable property be considered in that? What will this millage do? A 5 mil increase or all of them together? What would that do to, would we be at risk of losing the helicopter fleets and the barge lines and things like that could just simply be placed in another parish?
Yeah, I mean, currently all taxable property that are currently taxed that pay the school board mills, the sheriff's mill, and the current mills, all the same property will be included in this tax.
Has there been a conversation with any of those, the owners of those fleets, spelling out the situation that we're in, the steps that we're taking? Has that taken place at this point in time?
No.
Do you want to comment on that? I mean, when we originally were discussing the original five, I call it the original 5 mills, but the 5 mills that was authorized by the Constitution that you all could have adopted as levy districts, yes, there were several meetings with several businesses, PABI, I remember several meetings with PABI, and I know the parish president had attended a couple other meetings that I wasn't privy to now, who all that included and to what extent, can't comment on.
Thank you.
Mr. Russo?
In those conversations with PABI, what position did they take?
I can't speak for Bobby if someone here.
Well, I'm asking
can't-
what position did they relay to you in the
Okay,
meeting?
I don't recall, okay? They would like to.
Mr. Gui?
Mr. Thomas to come up and refresh our memories, please.
Bobby Thomas, Director of PABI. Our position with the administration 6 weeks, 2 months ago, whatever it was, that the Business Association was not going to support the increase of the millages, the 5 mills for the levies, until, as we put it, the parish got their house in order. Reduce expenses, increase revenues.
I think we all agree on that. I mean, what is y'all, I mean, I know y'all didn't meet about this next question, but, y'all may have. But how do you think the parish has fared with that? Has the parish got our house in order?
No, sir, we feel like there's a lot more room in there to increase fees, user fees. For instance, and it's been brought up many times at this table, the third increase for the water rates. Things such as that.
Mr. Russo, go ahead.
The problem is that we don't have a deficit in the sewer and water rates. And we can't use that money anywhere else but the sewer and water department. It's an enterprise fund. So we've done what we've had to do in the sewer and water by raising rates twice.
Well, didn't we use some funds, some BP funds recently?
Not for sewer, for the capital improvement?
Yes.
However, we got a grant to reimburse that.
Okay.
So that's coming back
That's
to the
good.
general fund.
That's good.
But we have not been able to use user fees dedicated to sewer and water for general fund operations in other departments. So we've done our work on sewer
In
and
that
water rates.
respect, then, I stand corrected. There's a lot of other places there, I think, that it could be spread across the board, not just impacting homeowners.
Well, I agree. And, any recommendations that y'all have will be listened to. But don't use the sewer and water because we're already breaking even and making money there
Point
to be
taken.
able to go towards that. But thank you.
Taken. And yes, we have been meeting with several different council members.
Oh, okay.
And there,
Thank you.
Have y'all, on Richie's, Mr. Blink's point, and point's well taken, have y'all reached out to anybody who has movable property that has heard, I mean, this is going around town, it was in a Gazette, everybody reads that, so, has that been discussed with the business community with those movables?
Yes, sir. I've met with some companies, and I'm not going to mention their names without them giving me approval, and they weren't too excited about this, to put it mildly.
Mr. Goey, you have the
Let
floor.
me finish, yeah. And again, we don't name names, but in the conversations you've had, if, let's just name XYZ company, they generate $5 million in taxes, and we pass a proposition that's going to generate $4 million in taxes, and they say, we're leaving, we're in the hole.
Well,
Follow me?
It's much more than that, though, Dr. Gu. It's exacerbated because then the school boards, 25 mills, the sheriff's office, 15 mills, they get reduced. They roll forward. All of a sudden, those 9 mills can turn into 20 mills.
Thank you. And so it would behoove us to have those companies identified, which I'm sure we have, and have a conversation with them. And I know we're talking about trying to vote on this August 8th, but it may be a reality check once we talk to these companies to say, we better rethink this. And if that conversation doesn't take place, shame on us.
I agree, and I suspect you will be hearing from these companies.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Mr. Russo?
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, Mr. Albro?
I just had a question about the water, because I was one of the council members talking with Bobby about that. But if we have all this windfall, how would we not, does that not include infrastructure where
Mr. Russo?
we have projects that are funded?
Well, today, Mr. Bartholomew hit that fund for the money that he needed for that water fund, and that's what we do. No, he got a grant, and he was short on the grant, so he came back and got some money out of the sewer and water fund to make up the difference. So, but extra question so I can understand it and answer it correctly.
As a council member for this first year and the years of sitting out here, I've just heard this gentleman sitting next to me begging for money for his water line issues and busting lines and not being able to fight fires because of it. And I'm hearing that we have too much money, we can't increase our rates in the water department, so it just doesn't make sense.
Well, let me clear it up then to you, because I never ever said we had too much money. We'll never have too much money. What I said was that the sewer and water user fees and millages that are dedicated for sewer and water operations have been collected, the rates have been increased, and we are now in the black. Black. So we are not.
Good place to be.
We are not in a position to be able to take that money and use it in recreation or in buildings or in other items. It's a dedicated source. And so if we raise the rates on the constituents again, it's going to just increase the surplus. Now, back to how we use some of that money to do the water intake. We didn't have enough money to do the water intake on the water plant expansion. And we did not, earmark enough money until we got the grant where we can get that BP money that we did put up reimbursed to the BP fund. Correct? You hope.
I think so. I'm trying to follow you.
The point is that we needed money for the water intake to continue with the water expansion, which in my opinion is a very basic priority of service, providing potable water to our constituents. So we were able to secure a $4 million grant through the Economic Development Office because of a hurricane that hit in Texas, through the Regional Planning Commission, which gave us the $4 million. Now, they're going to announce that in the next month or two. We already know that we're in good shape with it. And when that money comes through, we'll be able to take the BP money that we put up for that intake and put it back into the BP fund. So our BP fund, whatever it is now, $3 million, will go up by the amount that we took out. But the point is that we can't use sewer and water funds to do anything else. I don't know if I'm clear now. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to clear up. You're correct. Before the water and sewer rates went up, the general fund was funding the water and sewer fund in the tune of over $1 million, $2 million a year. Now, the water and sewer fund is standing on its own, it's paying its own expenses. We've been able to take some of the projects, that we needed to do out of that fund and do those projects from that fund, and it's not a drain on the general fund. So, do we have too much money? Of course not. But it has enough money to operate on its own now, where we're not having to supplement it from the general fund.
All right, thank you. Any more questions on the
That's not included projects that we have listed. They're just day-to-day operations.
It's day-to-day operations, and there are some projects, yes, some projects.
They are, but we don't have enough to cover all the projects that have been requested.
No, probably not, no.
That's all I'm saying.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the table on levies? From the audience? All right, with none, Jay, please.
A resolution ordering and calling for a special election to be held in the parish of Plaquemine, state of Louisiana, to authorize the establishment of off-track wagering facilities therein, making application to the State Bond Commission in connection therewith, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
I'll offer and ask for a second for discussion only. Mr. Albro. Basically, I was approached as the chair in conjunction with the parish president by Churchill Downs, who was looking to get this on the ballot as a requirement by state law. In order to have a gaming facility in any parish, you have to go through this election process. I was told that this is going to generate about $500,000 to our general fund revenue, or wherever we decide to appropriate those particular funds. We asked a little bit about things such as location. Location has not been identified yet. They're not even sure if this would pass, so they're not going to do a bunch of due diligence until they get a better idea of whether or not this is going to even pass with the council. I think, the general items they told me about it and then the president about it was, it's usually a 3,000 to 6,000 square foot building, 24-hour police detail. They never have any issues. I think I had one incident in the locations they had in the last few years. I think there's one in St. Bernard, or maybe two, I don't know, and then another one in Jefferson Parish and Gretna, are the ones that I know of. But I don't know too much more else about it. They gave a presentation. I think that would be open to give a presentation to any council member who is willing to sit down and discuss it with them. Ms. Newberry?
Yeah, I'm not a big gambler. I think this really puts a burden on the people of Plaquemines. I know it may bring us revenue, but then we may have some constituents that have gambling issues now, and I think that'll just increase. I mean, we're trying to collect on harbor fees, we're trying to collect on recreation fees and other fees in this parish, and if they keep losing money to gambling, that just puts us in a worse position. So that's just my opinion on it.
All right, Mr. Gooey?
I agree with Councilmember Newberry. We got mortgages, we got kids to feed, we got to pay our taxes, and I would hate to see us give another outlet for people to take their discretionary money to gamble, because the reason gambling is so profitable is because they always win, and I just don't think it's a good thing. But we're going to vote on it August 8th, and we'll find out.
All right, I would just, the only thing I'd add to that is, then, with that rationale, we might as well prohibit fireworks stands, snowball huts, daiquiri shops, any alcohol beverage facility, video poker, matter of fact, even the pharmacists, too. I mean, there's a lot of opioid addiction going around, so I think they contributed to that problem. Get rid of it, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just, that's a tough rationale. Any questions or comments on that one from the table? Other ones? From the audience? Yeah, thank you. All right, with none, let's move on to new business.
10B, District 1 update, Councilmember Bartholomew.
Go ahead, Doctor.
Okay. I have several questions, requests to the administration. One, understand whether we are with the culverts underneath the existing levees from Phoenix to Bohemia, where we're standing with that, where we are. And I'm just giving them to you, so next meeting you can do a little presentation on those items, if that's all right with you.
Okay.
Okay. Removal of the dirt on 39 that we dug out of the canal, where we are with that. Grass at the Davant Park on the south side. We did the northern side. We need to finish the south side so we can get all that straight, get that ready. And the generator for the courthouse, where we are with that, where is that? The pond behind Breakway, you already have that. You're addressing that, so we'd like to have that come to conclusion. And also the coastal projects throughout the parish that has been already put into works, that has been approved or going to CPRA for projects. A list of all of those projects that we have already been done. That's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you for your time.
Just if you can get that me an email, a list, we'll have that ready for you. If you get that in an email to a list to me, okay?
That's the
deal with that next time with you. The only thing I was trying to do is just give you heads up early enough to get it done. But from now on, if you prefer me to send you emails on all the requests, I don't have problems doing that, rather than discuss it at the meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ms. Newberry?
Mr. Bartholomew, you asked about the courthouse. I did printout what Mr. Todd Epley had sent us this week, because he's on vacation. He did say about the courthouse that they're moving in this week.
No, I didn't ask anything about the courthouse.
I thought you said
talked
something
about
about
the
the
generator.
Oh, the generator.
I know everything else.
I'm sorry. I caught the
You know
tail
the
end.
generator, you tell me about it.
I caught the tail end of that. I'm
You know the
sorry. But
generator?
anyway, let me finish it. IT's being installed and it'll be ready for
Yeah.
court come Monday.
You had
Okay.
all that. Thank you.
Caught the tail end.
What about coffee?
Appreciate it.
Coffee or?
Yeah, coffee too.
Coffee to it.
I'm not going
Appreciate
otherwise. Yeah. All right, any more, Mr. Battaglia?
No, that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All
Thank you,
right,
sir.
no problem. All right, District 9 update, we'll just go 1 through 5. Mr. Kardovich?
First, I'd like to thank you and all the employees for all the hard work y'all did during that storm.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thank you for your.
And grass cutting, we doing a good job of it. Just need to keep it up. Noticed the excavator started to scrape out a ditch, but it's been sitting there for the last week. So I'd like to get the rest of that ditch.
Okay.
Boat harbors, I wish Don was here, but I'll pass on that one. The Fort Jackson Museum, I talked to you already. I don't see the gentleman here. The post office came wanting to rent it. And I told him that we didn't have space and it would be up to Kirk and us if we wanted to empty the museum, put the artifact somewhere else and rent it to him, but
What would the revenue be?
don't know, he never set a price. I know when they was talking a while back about moving it, it wasn't too big of a revenue a month.
Mr. Khan, where are they located now?
Right up the street in some trailers.
And that's a private residence, or that's how us to that?
Oh, it's a private.
Okay.
And air conditions, I don't know if we got the one done in the old District 9 office for DMV.
Are those out now?
Yeah.
Okay. We were actively working on the Bureau Auditorium, but put that on our list.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
I will.
I like it.
I would love an email from everybody. Okay.
To make sure.
What's y'all office hours? All right, District D is deferred, E is deferred, F, Mr. Blink, I think you have a few items.
Yes, sir. I'm going to skip around a little bit here.
Okay.
The Empire Park update. I got with President Lapine, and it looks like there's been some activity there. The splash pad is almost done. That should be finishing up pretty soon. That's some really great news. Thank you for your efforts on that. I really appreciate that. Empire Safe Harbor update of a meeting on the books next week with Ms. Hilda to meet with the engineer and the grant staff to talk about that. That's really helpful. I really appreciate that. Looking forward to get that started. Going over to one, ferry discussion regarding ferry tolls. And so, we have the pending tax, if that's what the people decide on. My assistant and I did some research around ferries, both internal and external. We had our internal auditor put together a bunch of recommendations, some of those of which, if we start adhering to those, maybe can turn things around. I'm not saying we're going to get out of a $3 million hole with some of this stuff, but it's kind of like the broken window policy Giuliani put into place. You start doing little things, the big things maybe will be easier to fall into place. So maybe if we could start having a consistent method of collections on the boats, it is a worldwide practice to have folks show up to the boat with exact change. There's DJ's One Stop, there's the ferry stop, there's a snowball stands here, there's Freeman's on the down the road side. I think that's reasonable. The ferry tolls need to be collected in a way that match what our neighbors are doing, where the money is going into a box and not in the pocket. The optics of that are questionable at best. And it may even, lead to folks, being a little bit more honest and consistent in every single car being counted. Also, pedestrians aren't charged on the boats. There's only about 700 pedestrians per boat per year. It's only 2,100 people. It's not a windfall by any means, but it just might help make things become a little bit more consistent. Also, some just accounting stuff. There are recommendations that ridership be counted in more than one place. So ideally at the place where the toll is collected, so the deckhand getting the dollar, and then maybe upstairs in the wheelhouse, so where there could be some accountability there. Possibly even an electronic way to count how many cars make it onto the vessel. So things like that we could actively be doing. They're not high cost things. They're just, changing around our current practices. And it's in line with what our internal auditor suggested. And then just some other best practices, like I said, from around the country and world. That's it. Let me see here. And of course, we might have to look at the rates on those boats as well. It's about $8.50 per car to send vessels. To send a car across, we're charging about $1. We're in sort of a transportation island down in Plaquemines, though. I mean, we don't have a bridge. There's no alternative. It's not like in the city. So, I think that needs to be taken into account. But the subsidy levels that other ferries have around the country, for instance, in New York, it's $10 a passenger, $10.50 a passenger. So, it's not, outside of normal for ferry transportation to be subsidized. And I just wanted my colleagues to know that's out there. Sure.
DOTD has a ferry in Plaquemine, Louisiana. $1 both ways. We charge $1 each way, but they charge $1 in Plaquemine and up there south of on the side of Baton Rouge. I crossed that ferry. So I just want to let you know that one too.
BP money to get them a new one.
Well, that's all right. But I'm just saying what goes on up, with ferries in the state, that we look at going to New York instead of dealing with within our region. And if the state is doing such a good job, maybe we ought to give the ferry back to the state and let them operate the ferries.
And this is just a general question.
I'm just saying, I'm just
Just
saying.
a general question.
Eliminate
to the
that whole budget.
administration, But has there been an effort to look at, instead of putting forth a tax for, say, the ferries or for recreation, to do an add-on to the water bill, similar to Orleans Parish? Folks, are interested in having recreation, just, put it on like that.
Well, Mr. Russo has a comment.
Yeah, my only comment is that the audit that he's referring to about the ferries, we sent it out just now, so you all should have it, and you can review it, and happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Duke's available for your comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Blank had a question, another question.
Oh, that's all for the ferry discussion? Yep, that's all for me. Thank you. Thanks, y'all. And again, y'all did a great job during the storm. Appreciate it, y'all.
Guess not.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blank. Item H, please.
Discussion.
Sorry, 1 second. Mr. Blank?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Jesuit Bend drainage update. Julia, could you pull some of those, please? Sorry about that. All right. So, Jesuit Bend drainage. What's going on is the river has been at 15 feet or better, and we haven't been able to do any sort of digging. And what I would love to have in place is a system to just hit the ground running. There are certain pieces of so there's certain right-of-ways that could drain 60 homes or better that we need to be able to get on right away to have them swept as soon as the river gets down. I have these identified. I can give them to y'all. Y'all can prioritize them. I don't need to get in your way or you do your job, but the information is there. I can send you a link with the river gauge, so the second the river gets down, those folks can have some relief. And there's just, so that's all there.
Thank you, Mr. Blank. I'll add them to our list.
All right. Thanks, Julia.
All right, thank you. Item H, please.
Discussion by Presley, postmaster of the Bureau's Post Office, interest in running.
Defer it. All right, item's deferred. Item 11, please.
Approval of the minutes from the July 16, 2019 special meeting.
Offer by Mr. Bartholomew, second by Mr. Blank. Questions or comments on approval?
I can't say. I'll withdraw myself.
It doesn't matter. Withdrawn. Mr. Albro seconds. As long as you read them. All right, questions or comments? None? Machine is open. Passes 9-0. Do you have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Albro. Mr. Albro has a motion to adjourn. Mr. Bartholomew seconds. Any questions or comments? Machine is open. Passes 9-0. Meeting is adjourned at 4:30.